Now it's time to preview an upcoming game with Ryan Metzler.
Hey everybody, it's Ryan Metzler here again, and today we're going to take a look at a preview game for a Kickstarter game, or a preview video for a Kickstarter game. This game is going to be Paradise Fallen. This is the deck of cards you use in the game. This is a game from Crash Games, the makers of Rise and the Lost Dutchman, two previously successful Kickstarter campaigns, and now they're looking to fund this game. The idea of this game is that you're traveling between islands trying to explore them in the region of Hawaii. Each player is competing to be the fastest to explore all of these islands, or some of these islands, depending on the number of players. So real quick, we'll see how the game plays and how the cards drive the gameplay. We'll see what the game comes with, and remember that these are prototype components. And then we'll come back here and we'll get my final thoughts on the campaign as a whole. So here you can see a game of Paradise Fallen set up for 4 players. Now a reminder to you, these are not the final quality components, these are prototype components, so the art or the iconography or various components may change slightly, but the function they serve will be similar to what you see in this video. Now what you're looking at here is the board for the game, and you can see that there are 9 islands on this board represented by different cards. So you'll see they're in a grid of 3 by 3, and the board will always be set up in this manner, but somewhat randomly. The objective of the game is for each tribe, or each person who represents a tribe, to move from the center island out and explore all of these various islands. Exploring meaning that you have to match the island you're on with a card from your hand in order to explore that island. And in doing so, you will get a benefit from that island once in the game that will allow you to further your efforts to try and explore more. So you'll see that the map is laid out with these 9 cards. And with these 9 cards, you're going to be trying to move between them using different types of cards. And the deck here is made up of 4 different types of cards in reality. The first type of cards is going to be rations. You'll see they look like this, and they have a number on them printed of a number of rations. This one is a 3 ration. This one here is a 2 ration. And these rations are basically going to be providing movement points for you to move between islands. So we'll see that we're on the island of Maui, and it has a cost of 3. That is the cost to move into the island of Maui. Since we're already there, we don't have to pay that cost. But if we wanted to move to Lanai over here, it would cost us 2 rations to do so. And we would pay those 2 rations from our hand to move our piece off into Lanai, and now we're on that island. Any resources you use to move from one to the other, any of the rations that you use, if you decide to stop here and you had played a 3 ration, for example, would be lost. So I wouldn't want to use my 3 ration to move from Maui to Lanai, because I would lose 1 ration at the end. Now, if I'd wanted to move directly from Maui over to Niihau, I could pay the 3 ration to skip over Lanai and use all 3 rations to travel from Maui straight to Niihau. The second kind of card in this deck is going to be island cards. Now, I mentioned these earlier. When you're exploring, you're going to need island cards in order to explore an island. And you'll see they look something like this. You can see right here, this one is for Kauai. And you can use this card when you're on Kauai in order to explore that island. So if we had managed to move from Maui over to Kauai, we could play this card if we had it in our hand in order to explore that island. We would place it on the table. We would get one of these markers to put on it to show that we can use the ability of that card, and we would continue on. And note that there are different island cards for each of the different islands in the game. Collecting them from the deck will be an important aspect of trying to explore all of the islands before your opponents. Now that we've covered the 2 most basic types of cards, rations and island cards, we'll take a look at some of the cards that modify the way the game plays, and then we'll go over a couple of turns. So what we can see, there are 2 more types of cards in the deck. I've covered the first 2. The next 2 are going to be called aptitudes and aberrations. And we'll see here, aptitude cards are cards that you can use at the start of your turn in order to modify the way the game works, or modify some of the effects that are out on the board. So let's take a look at some of these. We'll see that we have this one here called Traffic. You can tell it's a aptitude card because it has a little torch in the top left corner and it has the word traffic on it. But this is a aptitude traffic card. And what it allows us to do is switch around the location of aberrations, which are negative effect cards that will affect your opponents and yourself if you move over them, that you can play during your turn. More on that in just a moment. But this one will allow you to swap the position of 2 of them. We can see we have one like Flee, which will allow us to break the rules of movement a little bit. If you were on one side of the board, Flee allows you to basically play Pac-Man in terms of your movement, to move off one side of the board and come back on the other, still paying the normal costs and rations for movements. There are more, like Barter. Barter is one you can play on your turn in order to discard cards from your hand in order to draw more cards. So you can discard 1 card to draw 2, or discard 2 to draw 3. And then finally, this last one we have here is Avert. What Avert allows you to do is to move different aberrations around the board from one location to another, maybe to get them out of your way or to move them into the way of the opponent. Now, this is not all of the aptitude cards that are in the deck, just a sampling. There are many more that will allow you to alter your gameplay, but I wanted to show you some of the effects you can use in order to get around the islands and make it a little bit easier on yourself. And finally, we have the aberration cards. As I showed you previously, the cards that you can play in order to make things more difficult on your opponent or sometimes easier on yourself. Now, these aberration cards are typically played either between two islands or on an island. And you can tell the difference because the ones that are played on an island will have a picture of an island on them, right here, whereas the ones that are played between will not. And these cards generally increase or decrease the cost to move, or give you some type of discard that you have to do in order to move across them. So we'll see here the Raiding Tribe. You can play this in between two islands, and anybody who moves between those two islands must discard a card when they do so. Or you can see the Rogue Tribe. This one goes on an island, just placed on any island, and it increases the cost to move into that island by 2 rations. Same thing for the Coral Reef. You place it between two islands, and anybody who moves through there has to pay 2 extra rations when doing so. And the Whirlpool decreases the cost to move into an island by 2 rations, as you can see on the bottom, but increases the cost of leaving that island by 2 rations. So it makes it harder to get away, but easier to get in. Anyhow, there are several of these. There's plenty in the deck, lots of them to affect the way that the board changes and moves throughout the game. So if you want to get these, you can play them out to the table, sometimes make it harder on your opponent, or in the case of the Whirlpool, maybe make it easier on yourself to get somewhere but harder to leave, and hopefully be the first to get to all the islands. So now why don't we take a look real quick at some of the games, or the turns of the game, and see how the game plays. So here we are at the start of a 4-player game, and each player will start the game with 5 cards in their hand. So we'll see I have my selection of 5 cards for the first player, who's going to be green. Now, we'll take a look at our cards, and we can see I have 2 island cards, 2 ration cards, and I have a aptitude card for bartering. So we can see here that I can do several things on my turn, but let's take a look at the islands I have. I have Niihau. I can go over here, and I can get to this island if I want to, or I want to get to that island to explore it. And I also have Nihaua. So I can go over to here and get to that island and try and explore it. And maybe I can do that with my rations in my hand. Well, let's see. I have a total of 5 rations. Let's say I want to go over to this island first. It would cost me 1, 2, and 1 more ration to get there. Now, if I wanted to play this aptitude card, I'd have to do the first on my turn. That's the first thing you have to do, is play your aptitude cards from your turn. They may affect something later in your turn, but you have to play them before you travel first. So, if I wanted to discard a card and draw 2 more, I could do that right now. I kind of like my hand, so I'm going to hold on to it maybe for a future turn. Instead, I'm going to play my 3 rations to the discard pile, and I'm going to move my piece from here over to my target island. Once I'm there, I can play the matching island card from my hand to the table in order to explore that island. Now, the goal of the game is to explore more islands than your opponent, or explore them faster. In a 4-player game, you need to explore 6 of these 9 islands. In a 3-player game, you need to explore 7, and in a 2-player game, you need to explore 8 of the 9 islands. So I am now 1/6 of the way to winning the game, and if I get those 6 islands before my opponents, I will win. So now that I've got this explored, we'll see that it has an ability printed on them, and all islands have an ability. It differs from island to island. But this one here says that if I play rations on my turn, I can use the ability of this card to pick up all of the rations that I've played. Well, right now I haven't really used all that many. I've used 3, but I'm not going to use the ability just yet. But we can look at my hand and see what else I have. I have another island, which is located over here, and I have 2 rations. Now, I can't get there right now on my turn. I can't move 3 because I don't have 3 rations to move. You'll note that islands can be used for 1 ration, so if you decide you don't want a ration, you can discard them to add 1 ration to your movement. But right now I kind of want to keep that because that island's not too far away. So maybe I hold on to the rest of my cards. I could discard down any cards I don't want to go on to the next turn and basically draw more cards at the end, but I kind of like all these, so I'm just going to draw 2 more cards, and I'm going to pass the turn to the next player. At this point, the next player would start their turn, and they would take a look at their hand. So their hand is also 5 cards, and they have 2 island cards, which happen to be the islands to the left and the right of the positions they're currently at. In addition, they have the traffic aptitude card that I showed you earlier, allowing them to move aberrations around the board. But right now, there aren't any aberrations to move. We can also see that they happen to have an aberration or 2 in their hand. They have a green mist and a rogue tribe. So they can play these out on their turn if they want to in order to modify the state of the board. And they're actually going to do so. So let's say they want to go over to Kauai. Well, they'd need 3 or 2 rations to do so, but they don't have 2 rations in their hand, aside from the islands they could discard in order to move. Well, they don't want to use those because the islands are pretty close by. So instead what they can do is they can use their green mist on the island they're standing on. Let's say they play this to Maui. If they play this card to Maui, we can see on the card that it increases the cost to move into the island by 2, but decreases the cost to leave the island by 2, which is the important part of what we're looking at. So they can play this to Maui, and now Blue, the player whose turn we're on, can move away from Maui for 2 less. So they're moving to Kauai, which has a cost of 2, but since it's down by 2, they move there for free. And once they're there, they can play the Kauai card from their hand in order to explore that island. And now they have the ability to move around different aberrations using the Kauai ability. Now, when you use these abilities, you can only use one on your turn. So if you have multiple islands with tokens on them, you can only use one of them. And once you use the token, it's returned to the supply, and you can no longer use that ability in the game. So getting these abilities is a once per game and 1 ability per turn bonus that you have to exploring the islands. Now that they've completed that, we'll take a look at the rest of their hand. They could swap around the aberrations on the board, but again, why? What's the point? And they actually can't now because they'd have to do this first on their turn. So now that the beginning of the turn is passed, their aptitude cards aren't going to be of particular use. You'll have to save them or discard them at the end of the turn in order to get more cards. The Rogue Tribe here, this aberration card, could be played out to the board, but it's only going to increase the cost of movement for other players into a new island, and he doesn't exactly know where other players are headed just yet, so maybe he'll hold on to it. Our third player then picks up his hand and has a look. Well, he's got a Maui, which is great. He's already on Maui, and he could use that to explore the island right away. But first, let's see what else he has. He has an aberration of a coral reef, he has 2 rations, and he has a raiding tribe aberration. He doesn't have much in terms of islands. So maybe he's going to start off his turn, and he's going to go ahead and play Maui to the table in order to explore Maui. And he will get the ability of Maui immediately. Now, he can choose to use that ability by discarding the token, and the ability of Maui allows him to draw 2 cards from the deck and add them to his hand. So maybe he does that, and he pulls a card or 2 into his hand, and he takes a look now at what he has. All right, he has a Wahoo. He has a target to get to, and he can see a Wahoo is down here in this corner close to me. Well, he's got plenty of rations. He has 3 and a 3 and a 2 ration, so he decides to make his way to a Wahoo by discarding cards. And he would need 2, 3, 4, 5 rations to get there, or if he decided to go this way, 1, 2, 3, 4. But we have a bonus here. It's -2 to leave the island thanks to the aberration card played by our blue player. So it's actually only going to be 0 to move to this island and 3 to move to the second island. So he has to discard a 3 ration in order to get over to here. And let's say it's the red player. Now that he's at Oahu, he can play his Oahu card. So he's going to explore 2 islands on the same turn, and he'll get the token on that card, which he can use on a future turn because he's already used 1 ability this turn. After this, he takes a look at his hand and he says, okay, I have all of these aberrations left. I'm going to play these to the board and hopefully make it hard for another player to do something on their turn. And since yellow's the only player not to go yet, why not make things difficult on them? So he's going to place a raiding tribe between Maui and this other island, and he's going to place a coral reef between Maui and the island closest to me. So now you get an idea of how the game plays. You can see that you're going to be using your resources or your rations to try and get between islands to best use the benefits of the aptitude cards and avoid the negativities of the aberration cards to get to those islands and explore them before the other players. And whoever is able to best manage all of these resources and explore the required number of islands first will be the winner. Well, there you have it. That is Paradise Fallen from Crash Games, currently up on Kickstarter and looking for your support. The game has an interesting element of trying to race to the different islands and best utilize the hand that you're given in order to accomplish the goals that you need to accomplish. And it kind of has a similar feel a little bit to the game Kahuna from the Cosmos game line, in which you're traveling around Hawaii building bridges in order to try and have control. Now, this is not an area control game, but it has a similar feel. Of course, a similar theme, but it adds an element of strategy in as far as trying to prevent your opponents from getting to their respective islands by placing things in between, but using those aberrations to your benefit at times in order to make your travel easier. So there's definitely an added level of strategy insofar as using those cards to benefit yourself and detriment your opponent. There's also, of course, the timing of things. You don't want to hold on to cards for too long that you might need. If you don't need them now, it might be best to get rid of them. You can try and do the long-term planning of holding cards and moving around the islands, but sometimes it may be better to live in the moment and just get rid of those cards at the end of your turn, discard them if you don't need them, and draw back up. Anyhow, if any of this sounds good to you, I know that Crash Games would appreciate your support on their Kickstarter project. Check out the link and see if it looks good for you, and hopefully you'll find a game that you would enjoy playing.
Thanks for watching our review today. For more information about board games, as well as the #1 board game audio podcast, check out Dicetower.com for reviews, interviews, and more. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower.